Welcome, viewers, into the episode 9. Today, we are going to talk about chapter 9, which is titled The Royal Path. Um, also, I think, we are on chapter 9. So, this is a book of 18 chapters. So, we are almost at a midpoint in terms of our conversation. And today, it's only going to be Kabir and me joining this conversation. So, with that, Kabir, I'll open this first for you. Uh, let me start with a question actually this time. Like, is this actually talking about Bhakti Mark? Is this chapter, because it did feel like that, but it also didn't feel completely like that. So uh
Yes.
I'm curious on your interpretation of this chapter.
Yeah, if I have to give it a name or summarize what it's talking about, yes, it is pointing about bhakti, but I would put the adjective nirakar bhakti in Hindi, which means formless devotion, devotion to the formless. And when you are devoted to formless, then you can see consciousness in all the forms, which is some in the bhakti movement, what is historians put as bhakti movement, right? So Kabir, Nanak, and so on, all these Sufis, they are known to be following this mark. And not that it started at that time, it just became popular. As we can see, Bhagavad Gita is from a much more ancient time, and it was already being pointed at.
Hmm.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's very interesting to cover, because a lot of versions of Gita which people read feel very personified to the, like, that was one thing which was standing for me even in this chapter. Like, I could not, like, I don't know if it was my own cultural influence, but I could not read it as if uh, like there is this person Lord Krishna is saying that, you know you need to be fully devoted to me. So I'm just curious, was that just me? Like, is the chapter also in some way alluding? I think you already clarified it is not, but somehow, even after knowing that, reading that chapter, I got that feeling that this is now somebody saying you need to be devoted to me.
Yes, that is a valid point. I think most people can relate with that. And I can also relate with it, especially in the initial readings when I started reading Bhagavad Gita. It has become easier now to see it in the right context, I would say. I believe the reason is that the pronoun I, every time we see the pronoun I being used by ourselves or others, it's always pointing to a body mind. Imagine, I mean, we have never ever seen any human being say I and refer to anything else. They are referring to a name, a autobiography, a body mind. So when it is used in another context, in a deeper way, like Krishna is using, he's using I as in I pointing to the supreme consciousness within his form, which is true for all of us. But because this is used in this unique way, I believe to anybody starting on the path or not yet comfortable with experiencing disappearing of their identity and seeing that, oh, there is a sense of I, there is a sense of existence without being a personal identity being there. Until that point comes, there is bound to be uh, some, difficulty, I guess, in digesting this fact that supreme consciousness is using this pronoun in a form.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Because yeah, like, even like, because I was pretty amazed that, like, now I could clearly see why there's so many books who can interpret this as being a directive from an individual, uh, that you need to be devoted to me. And I think that's difficult to ignore in this chapter, unless I think you have experienced at least some form of that. I
Yes. And may I also just add to it that it is not just Bhagavad Gita or Vedantic texts, but even beyond this culture, if you read some of the Sufis or Bible at certain points, or even Quran at certain points, it is the speaker is referring I to the supreme consciousness, and it has been misinterpreted in severely, uh, I would say severely misinterpreted, because especially uh, in cases where sometimes fanatics have taken those words to mean that anybody who is not following this is pure evil, and so violence can be justified, right? And it was meant in a very, very, very different way.
Yeah, because ironically, like when they are using I in the context that everybody is me, like, right? So it is even more foolish than to go and kill someone because you're actually kind of killing the god you believe in.
I always, I thought at very young age, at 12 itself, I could see the irony of it when I'll say, when I'd hear people say that, okay, for example, somebody is saying Allah is the only true God, right? And anyone who doesn't believe in Allah is kafir, or it should be judged. No, if he's the only true God, how can there be a Krishna out there? How can there be a Christian God out there? So fact is, in the end, Krishna is pointing in this particular chapter that no matter who you are praying or who you are worshiping me, even if you don't realize, because there is only one God. You don't even need to be a big philosopher to see through this irony.
And I'm saying, like, even worse than that, when people go and say that we're gonna kill in the name of God, and when the God is saying I am present in everyone, like you are just going and like killing God, right? Like practically, then like that's
Yes.
like the person, like, yeah, it's yeah, I think it's just ironical.
Yeah.
Uh, what about the title? Like, what's the word royal here
Yeah.
signifying?
I believe even during the time of Buddha, it seems like there was a tradition that if you want to really honor a path, if it's close to your heart, you really love it, you use these kind of metaphors for it. Even Buddha's time, if you have heard, they would use Arya Marg. So Arya was like a superior marg, right? So Arya, Ashtangic marg, and so on, right? So the royal path, it is the path which basically take you to your divine nature, and you almost, you can say that you then rule over all your suffering and go beyond it. It enables that. So I think it's in those metaphorical terms is how it is used. And I believe Krishna has chosen this particular adjective for on in this chapter and not earlier, is because if you look at it, uh, more than Karma Yoga, more than any other path, this seems to be also the path which is, in some ways, if you're prepared for it, the simplest, because you have just surrendered to the supreme will, no matter what is happening and no matter what you're doing. Now, you are not analyzing something like he at one point says that surrender to me when you're suffering. Or I think he used a term, not surrender, but what is the term used? Do you remember? He's saying
Like he's saying, yeah, like sacrifice. uh,
sacrifice, etc.
yeah.
You're right. Sacrifice everything to me, right? Because there was this tradition of yajna during that time where you would offer sacrifices, as you would say swaha and pour something in the fire. You would have that intention that you are sacrificing something, and you are basically surrendering it to the Lord, giving it, sending it to the Lord. So he's saying not only the good, but sacrifice your suffering also to me. Lord, this is you have given me suffering. This is surrendered to you. You make me suffer as long as you want. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I think for our Hindi, we the word probably chadhana, right? When you like samarpan
Yes.
karna, right? That's the right
Yes.
feeling there.
That
That
is more accurate. Unfortunately, English doesn't have the equivalent
yeah,
term sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. So I have a question on that. So like it says that whatever you eat, whatever you do work, right? Like any selfless service you do. What about, let's say, if you got angry? Like, can you also like just you know, offer that to God that this was in your name?
Yes, you can. There is a slight paradox there, because you obviously can't surrender while you're angry. Anger itself means you're not in a state of surrender. You are in the state of you're in the state of craving or aversion, which is opposite to the state of surrender. So while you're angry, of course you can't surrender it. How? But afterwards, yes, that is the right attitude. That all right, Lord, you wanted me to be angry, and so it happened. Uh, but it disconnected me from you for a certain period of time. I wish you don't disconnect from you. And that's how the sages pray. When they feel identity coming in, their ego triggering in, a sense of individual I comes up and makes them behave through anxiety or anger or reactions or cravings. And when they can see through this identity after a while, they kind of pray through as that identity to the supreme consciousness within them, that, oh Lord. So they are now calling the supreme conscious within them as, oh Lord, please take me over. Please destroy my identity. Please kill me. Why do you leave me alive? Kill my autobiography and absorb me in you. Why do you send me away from you? Which means, why do you let this egoic identity come?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I got angry today morning and I was just thinking, like, because I was reading the chapter and I was thinking that, yeah, that can you actually also offer this to? I think the offering is the word. Sorry, so I think the word in English would be offering, basically.
Is more
Offer.
accurate.
Yeah, yeah. So the chapter starts with like, let me tell you a secret. So what's the secret here? Because I read the chapter and I feel a lot of it was already said. So what's the new information here now, which is separate from what is already shared till now?
My understanding is that Krishna is sensing couple of things intuitively in his disciple Arjun, where he feels that now, on one hand, Arjun is more ready, where Krishna can be just absolutely more emphatically referred to himself as the supreme consciousness. So in the past chapters, he is giving those hints. But if you see in this entire chapter, it's just Krishna all the way. And it's almost like he is expressing his supreme form in some ways, you can say. He is saying, I am the beginning, I am the end, I am Brahma, I am Vishnu, and I am the good and I am the bad. He hasn't said that. He's almost, uh, uh, you can say, he is almost, I don't want to use the word attack, because it sounds like a negative thing, but in a positive way, he wants to overpower Arjun's ego. That don't at all in any way see me as in as a person, or as even a devata, a regular god. Don't make that mistake. I am the supreme consciousness within all the beings, including you, and be very, very, very clear about that. So I guess this emphatic presentation of this is unique in this chapter, where if Arjun, and I hope Krishna, or not I hope, but I believe that Krishna could see that Arjun has intuitively now been prepared for this kind of revelation. This kind of a revelation can stop a seeker's mind completely. Okay, it's that kind of suddenness, the impact that I am everything, I am beyond time and space, and everything comes from me, will just freeze a egoic mind. Okay, and so he wanted to prepare him, and I believe telling him that, okay, here comes the secret, be very alert, don't miss this, don't let your egoic mind come and again interpret it in any other way.
Hmm. That's interesting because that was my next question. That there is, when you read this chapter, there's a sense of ego which comes out. And I was thinking, is this now the god is egoic, or so maybe it is a reflection of your own ego? Because when you're reading that text, because it does feel when there's a lot of sentences pointing and like to saying that I am basically everything, right? And if and because we relate I with so much human, and if a human said something like this, you would definitely say that okay, that this
Yes,
is
of
ego,
course.
right? This is
Yeah.
a sense of arrogance. So, and I've seen like sometimes like when you watch a lot of spiritual people, like especially the ones who are very famous online, you also feel that sense of arrogance in their words sometimes. So now I'm confused, right? Like now I'm curious that uh like so one aspect of it, what I'm seeing is that okay, one aspect of it is my ego actually getting like triggered in a way. Not triggered is the right word, but it reflecting itself in these words when it hears it. And but when you hear the other spiritual teachers, are they also coming from the right place, or do you think sometimes they are actually the one you see there is actually more identity, uh, when they sometimes feel arrogant or a little more uh, all encompassing in terms of what they can do. uh,
The only place where you can differentiate this is intuition. It cannot be judged based on just words and actions or with your rational mind. Two statements being made by two individuals can be exactly same, and only someone who is already intuitive enough on the path can differentiate. Now, my intuition tells me when I hear a lot of these teachers who are around currently, I do see a sense of arrogance, a personal identity which is left there. I may not be able to uh, write down and make a case against this again using logic or explain it because it is intuitive in nature. There can be some hints in behaviors, for example, their behaviors in the world, uh, or you can say arrogance also slips through sometimes through body language, through certain words. Having said that, I'm again uh, is contradicting myself, if you may, by saying that intuition is the only true guide. So unfortunately, how do we know then if we are being intuitive or we are being heady when we are passing that judgment? You would know in time as your intuition grow. Unfortunately, it's there is nothing to measure it from outside. So that's where we got to go. However, like I said, in my intuition, most of the teachers I see are still in the trap of personal identity or arrogance, and it's very, very clever, by the way. So one has to be very, very careful. And another thing I wanted to use here is I believe, even though this chapter is for public, obviously, and but one thing you see that it has come as chapter 9, not chapter 1. There's a reason for that. And I believe that this kind of revelation, when a teacher decides to speak in this way, is very intuitive that the person he is talking to, what is the state of that person. So they have to be out of their egoic mind when the, uh, you know when an expression like this will be accepted at the right place and will help. You are right that if you go to unprepared crowd and speak in this way, half of them will judge you or will dismiss you as an arrogant person. The other half might take you as a personal god and will start worshipping you, which will both be the outcomes that a genuine sage would not want.
yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I can see that. I can see now that in absence of any, like these are just sentences, right? And this is like what kind of light is thrown on them will define what you see in reflection, right? Like so, and if the light is coming from you, and then what you interpret will be part you basically. There is no way around. So, like you can't simply can't interpret it better than what your light, like in a way, than what you are right now within you. So,
May I share something personal? I just feel that. over time, I can relate why enlightened beings have to use it in first person. At times, you might argue that, okay, if it's such a tricky thing, why not just use the term supreme consciousness? Why do you even refer it as I? Talk about it in third person. That's fine. At least it will not be misinterpreted. Yeah. But I personally, in my interaction with some people who are extremely heady, sincere seekers, but heady seekers, I had to at some point come up and say, hey, why are you talking about it? Consciousness is this, and awareness is that. You are it. I'm it. It's here. There is nothing else but consciousness. Why are you talking about it as if we are two individuals and talking about consciousness? This is something which egoic mind does it so cleverly. And I'm talking about seekers who have been on the path for decades in a sincere way making this mistake. And I guess out of sometimes just compassion or just becoming sick of egoic conversation like this, someone who can see as consciousness as this conversation is unfolding, they call it out and they have to say that, okay, if you can't accept your consciousness, here you go. I am the supreme consciousness. This body and everything here is out, has come out of me, because they feel that they get slightly frustrated. Why can't they see? Why can't everybody see they are it? But they feel, okay, let them see there is a live example. Because if they have some intuition in them, they sense that this person is not at all being arrogant. And that is something I was, in fact, having a conversation yesterday with someone about this. And I was saying that the true enlightened beings that I have seen, they were quite imperfect as people. But one common thing I could see among them, even if there was anger, even if there was a statement like this, that I am everything, there was no sense of arrogance in that. That was a common thing. Because with my cynical mind, you can say intuition plus cynical mind, I was always scanning for that in someone I would follow. And I am happy to report that that's why I'm calling them the authentic beings. And I can think three of them whom I have met in person. And there was not a trace of arrogance. And they didn't give a shit what you think about them.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Like if you would judge them, if you say you are an arrogant ass, they'll say, yeah, sure. Yes, I am. Why don't you leave? They care not a bit in making a case or offering a defense how they are not arrogant and they are beyond arrogance. They couldn't care less.
No, this is like because I think because I remember reading this chapter at a different time and I read it very differently. So like the sentences, how you read them, I think especially the I am the ritual and the sacrifice, I am the true medicine and the one. Basically where they basically where Lord Krishna is saying like I am basically everything, right? So uh, but this was very interesting, like the different such subtle nuances on different dimensions of this aspect.
I agree with you. When I read it first time, I believe this was one of the chapters where I did not spend so much time, because I think I shared with you I spent a lot of time in understanding Bhagavad Gita, but because this is exactly the kind of expression which you can't enter. It's almost like Zen master in some ways. Zen masters give statements which stop your mind. So I had to, my mind had to, because when I was starting as a seeker and read Bhagavad Gita for the first time, it was mostly from my mind. My egoic mind was involved, intellect was involved. I remember being far more intellectual than I am now in certain ways, far more heady, if I may say. And I couldn't make sense of this. So I said, "Oh, okay, maybe this is something abstract. Maybe I'll understand it another time. The rest of it is interesting. Let me move on. It might mean something." But it didn't, I couldn't make much sense of it because it's so direct. My mind couldn't even give it any twist.
Yes. Yes. I think I had this. Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying because um, it's, yeah, there's no, I think what you said, it's very direct, there's not much to interpret. It's, and when you, and the direct information is too much for you to take personally, if you have been like too much into science, and like if you, with your own worldview, the way you have been brought up in this world. But yeah, it was not that hard for me, at least with, like, this much time already talking about it. But yeah, if I was reading this for the first time, this would definitely uh, kind of not make a lot of sense to me. Like it
Yeah.
will make sense, but it'll feel more poetic rather than literal, which it is. So,
Yes. Yes.
so there's an interesting verse which says, you know, all creatures find their existence in me, but I'm not limited by them. Behold my divine mystery. These creatures do not really dwell in me, and though I bring them forth and support them, I am not confined within them. I like, I found it interesting. I think it makes sense to me, but if you can elaborate on this
Mm.
a little bit.
We use the metaphor or simile of dream in the previous chapters, right? And I think again here you can use that. So you, in your dream, the entire space, the town, the time, the beings, all are created by you, your mind. But you're not limited to any one of them. All of that is within you. But no one can say that Shashank is just this character in the dream. Shashank's mind is everything which is out there. So I believe Krishna is again re-emphasizing that point as to not to limit him in certain beings. Don't limit him only in people who are, for example, good and pious and holy. He's in the holy and the unholy, in the lowest creature as in the highest creature. And so he's saying everybody, everything, and everybody is in me, but it won't be fair to say I am in that being and not in the other.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then it says, at the end of the eon, these creatures return to unmanifested matter. At the beginning of the next cycle, I send them forth again. Is this referring to like the whole coming, like big, like in the previous chapter I was talking about, I think, the universe comes into manifested form and then it goes away. There's a day and a night of the Brahma, basically. So when it says eon, is it referring to that, or is it just referring to one life, like one basically life of?
I believe when I think if we don't read between the lines, if we take it literally, I think this is a cosmological uh, statement here. And I believe he means by eon the entire existence, or some people call it Big Bang or whatever they may want to call it. However, there is something which we miss out at times, which is the supreme reality, Krishna, is also beyond space and time. So even when he's saying that at the beginning of Aeon they come into and manifest, and then they again come out after the end of another Aeon, we feel as if, okay, there is this space and there is this eternal time, or endless time, and there is this Brahma or supreme being within that, which almost limits the supreme being within space and time. But the interesting part is, because there is no time when there is just unmanifest. So how do you then even say? So all these statements of creation and time are one step out from the unmanifest. So the when unmanifest becomes manifest, if we may use the term, sometimes unmanifest is referred as pure awareness, and manifest, the first manifestation, which is the purest form of consciousness, is called consciousness or pure consciousness. And that's when the time and the space is created and the consciousness is created, and all the forms are projected out. Right? You may say our dream starts. No, in one way, as the unmanifest, one could argue that there is no time. So how can you talk about eons? But from the perspective of consciousness and after manifestation starts, you can see time and space and causes and effects and eons and end of eons and evolution and so on. They are both true depending on which perspective we are looking.
Hmm. Okay. This one was interesting, right? So it says that, but who great souls seek my divine nature, they worship me with one pointed mind. Worship, the word worship here, right? Is that just referring to dhyan, meditation here with one pointed mind? Or like, because worship, at least when we hear worship, is a very different picture which comes into my mind. So what is the word worship is?
I would like to expand that word. I would say when you're in love with a woman, you're worshipping her with all your being. She is in your mind, you are smitten, you are overtaken, and you're in love where you just can't, even if you want to study, you can't stop thinking about her. She has overtaken you completely. That is the kind of the by worship. I think that's what he means, that be in love. If somebody is absolutely fallen in love with me, that I want anything but Krishna. I want the supreme consciousness. And, I'm just sick and tired of all the changes. And I again forget, and I get attached with the changing forms, and I get into craving aversion. I get suffering. I'm tired of it. I want to stay with the supreme consciousness as the supreme consciousness. Krishna, supreme consciousness, please just destroy me and merge me in you. So a lot of these expressions, if you see from Sufis, from Maulana Rumi, you would feel that it's a lover talk. And that's why a lot of lovers use Rumi's phrases. Only irony is that they are using it in terms of the duality in a personal form. But Rumi and all the other Sufis like Bulle Shah and everybody, they always meant it in uh, they were in love with consciousness. And that's why also, even in terms of language, often they refer to themselves as the wife, because in those days, or even today, to some extent, I guess, uh, because of patriarchy, the woman is supposed to belong to the man more than other way around, right? So they want to put themselves as the woman, as the weaker gender in some ways. Uh, just put quote unquote in certain context. I'm speaking that, and they want to be belong and taken over and taken care of by the supreme consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it's bhakti, right? Like
Oh
basically.
yes,
So, like, can you truly, you cannot fall in love. Like you say, you fall in love, right? You don't
yes.
you don't walk into love. Basically signifying that there is no choice uh, at some level. So is there a choice? Because I've been experiencing devotion like for the first time in my life. Like I feel I am in love, right? And uh, but it happened right on this path rather than I decided to go there. So can somebody choose to go there, or is there something which will just happen to someone?
A deeper answer is no, you can't choose. But uh, I want to give another answer here, little less than deeper, which is it it is because of our suffering that we are looking for answer. So our love for the world, the love for the phenomenality, the love for achievements and egoic goals has been there for eons, for so many lifetimes. That love affair is falling apart. There's a lot of heartbreaks there, causing a lot of suffering, and that is detaching us from that particular love for the forms. And as that is happening, consciousness is turning within, sometimes by reading a book, sometimes having conversation with someone, sometimes there's discerning within, what does it all mean, looking for the answer. That search for answer leads it to its new lover, which is the supreme being, which is where it can finally rest after so many lifetimes of suffering. It finds peace and joy, but it still is a lover who has not completely detached from his ex yet, because he's still drawn to the ex. Goes out and says, but it was good. I had so many lifetimes. I had so much fun. Let me start this. Let me try this. And even that was fun. I'm missing that. This is boring. And in the beginning, because so there is this gray shade here that you are not over your ex, and you have not fully committed to this glimpse, and you have got the first kiss, and that was amazing. And but you are not ready to move into your lover's house yet, right? And that is the sadhana. So when this is happening, I want you to think of someone who's talking to a counselor. He's between two relationships. I wish I didn't have to leave that, but I'm really in love with this. I'm tired of suffering. And call them a counselor, call them a spiritual guide. So this is where I'm saying the second answer, which is yes, it was destiny that this is happening. There's no choice. But here, when these conversations happen and discernment has a space, and one can try to remind themselves again and again. One needs to remind themselves again and again as to all the pains they have suffered, and they continue to suffer every time they go to their ex. And this is where the need of a guide or a spiritual guru is there. So there is a place for having that guidance, that encouragement, the encouragement of a sangha, where we can detach from that toxic lover and be with our soulmate, which
Yes.
is the supreme
I
being.
I had a very interesting like imagination going on as you were saying one of this, that basically you are in a desert, which is like signifying the suffering, and so and you are looking for water, right? And you keep looking, you find a small oasis, and yeah, it's like it's water. It gives you something. It's probably salty or probably like it's, but so it temporarily satisfies you, but it's not fulfill, like it's not quenching your thirst basically, right? Like quenching your thirst. So you say, okay, I'm going to move to next choices because I'm going to find something which, and you keep doing this till you realize there was always an oasis within you. Right? You did There was always a oasis. All you had to just was turn inside and look at it, and that truly kind of satisfies your thirst. And once you're able to see that, you will fall in love, right? Like basically with that. And it is only till you not see inward, um, until that suffering is not big enough, or the realization that these are all temporary voices. Like it will just hold you for a 2 day 3 day, but then you have to move on to the next voices till you find that inside. So anyways, that was just something.
In fact, there is another beautiful story, a similar story, and I think Eckhart used it in his book, which is someone who had been begging for all their lives. And that story is a bit sad because they die, I believe, in that story. And then someone discovers that the big box where he was sitting, the big metal box which he thought was worthless, had gold in it. So he was sitting on the gold and begging. That's how it is, that we are looking for oasis, and the supply, eternal, endless supply of water is within you, if you go to your metaphor. And but that discovery, like you said, and like I hinted, is not possible until you're detached. You stop looking for verses outside. So one has to get tired of it. To that extent, there is a role of grace. There is a role of destiny and grace, where that tiredness has to happen. Even yesterday, I can think of something. My dad was sharing with me, and he was telling me, "Hey, why don't you uh, teach meditation to this nephew of yours?" And I was like, no, he doesn't care about it. He's not interested in it right now. He was not. And So I was like this, it won't be good actually. In fact, it won't be valued. And when the time comes, he might think, oh, I've tried meditation and I've seen it doesn't help. Because he's not ready, he will not see the value in it right now. He will not see the truth in it. And later, when he is tired of this phenomenality, these OSAs, unfortunately, in some cases, people don't turn towards meditation and they say, ah, been there, done that. That doesn't work either because they were not ready. They couldn't do it in that perspective. Your voice is, Shashank, can you unmute and then?
Yeah, so you're saying that this reminds me of that same first sutra of Patanjali, which is ab yoga, which is like you have to say now, like I feel like nothing else has worked.
Oh.
Right? Like I when reached to meditation, to be honest, I have shared this before. I think I was feeling like I'm drowning, right? And when I was truly helpless in my head, at least, is when I was ready to hold on to a log, which like right, it was. So I think that I definitely relate to that, even though it sounds a little sadistic, but that you have to suffer a lot to reach here. But I think that is, at least in my own experience, that was the truth. Even in this specific lifetime, in the sense that I was really suffering, and in my head, right, like the suffering was not real in the sense like it was not external. It was not that I didn't have a roof on my head. I had like most of the things. I have done my schooling from a premier institute, so I could have always taken a job, but there was so much suffering in my head before I found this path. So I definitely relate to that. So there's a passage which says, "Those who worship me and meditate on me constantly, without any other thought, I will provide for all their needs." So I think, like I've heard this sentiment from like my mother, maybe, right? Like, who believe in the traditional bhakti. And I could not relate to, like, it took me 10 years before. But now, yeah, like I feel truly that I felt that grace in my life. Uh, so maybe it's like, can we talk about grace? Because it has amazed me how that help arrives when you need it. Once you really let go, like once you leave this need for control and put your faith into something bigger than you, somehow a lot of friction from your life is removed. Uh, like this grace or grease, basically, in terms of your life, starts showing up in so many places where you put. And I think it's just too much to be called coincidence. So you can say, okay, it was coincidence for a few times, but when it happens in such unexpected ways, you have to see the grace. And I see so much grace in my life now. Uh, what's happening there? Like,
When I hear this question, I'm reminded of my one of my maybe my second favorite uh, piece in the Bible, where Jesus was walking by, and then he finds someone who looks like is really inspired, and then Jesus is like, "Okay, all right, come along, let's go forth on this path." And this person is like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I would come along, but uh, I got to take care of this and that, and this business and that family, and how would I take care of all of this if my responsibilities if I do that?" And Jesus kind of admonishes him lovingly by saying, "Oh, you of little faith." And then he says, "Look at the lilies in the field, look at the birds in the sky. They neither toil nor spin, and yet they are taken care of so beautifully. And you, the human, is the most beloved creation of the Supreme Consciousness of the Lord. You think He will not take care of you. You have so little faith. All the birds and animals and plants and everything is taken care of so beautifully. The lilies is the example he is giving, that he dresses even the plants so beautifully. You think he'll not dress you up, will not feed you. Can you trust? Can you let go of the individual sense of control? And like you said, allow grace to flow. And sometimes I put it in my counseling sessions when I see a lot of sense of identity and fear. And in people who actually claim that they are devotees and they believe in God, sometimes I use this only with those who call themselves devotees, not to admonish them, but to remind them they are, yeah, or to challenge their egos a little bit, that, oh, so you don't think that your God can do that, that only you have to fix these problems. God can solve bigger problems, but all these day-to-day problems you have to fix. And of course, we can expand on it by saying it's not like God will necessarily produce things from thin air. It sometimes feel that way, but it might make things happen sometimes even through your own body mind. When you start operating intuitively and you have given up a sense of control, grace acting up, the consciousness when it is using a body mind is in a state of flow, because consciousness is among all the beings, so it has infinite resources. That way, it's like your mind when it is creating the dream, it has control over all aspects of that dream. And we talked about someone, a boy who had this vivid dreamer who was aware that there's dream going on. This is my dream, and he could change the dream, right? And not just one person. It is the experience of thousands. That supreme consciousness is in all beings and everything out there, like Krishna has explained in this chapter. So you, by surrendering to the supreme consciousness, is not surrender to the most powerful force, moving every little thing, every microscopic particle, and every galaxy out there, right, within the creation. So of course it's such a powerful state. Of course, you you can't digest the coincidences happening, because it is being moved by the supreme will, and we, the body mind, the I is just the one little cog, and I'm just amazed by it and just enjoy the show.
Yeah. And I think even for like I think the good part, like this is an interesting aspect of letting go, that you can also become the medium for grace basically. Not just the one who's accepting it, but also the one who can be an instrument for the universe to be grace for someone else. So
And they are both synonyms. You can't do one without the other. The moment you accept the grace, the acceptance means you have surrendered to its will, and therefore now you have become an instrument. And it is such a gift we can do for the rest of humanity, because people don't see beings, the presence holders, or people who are operating without fear. Even in the top CEOs and billionaires, you see fear and cribbing and pulling each other down. And so you see, oh, it never ends. In the most powerful politicians, in the most powerful businessmen, you are seeing that personal energy and sense of doership. And so world needs such beings in manifested form to say, here I am. Somebody, people who can say, see, I give up all, and I'm feeling freer than ever. I'm feeling just more joyful than ever. I'm feeling so much sense of abundance. All my things are taken care of.
like I've always like thought about this, not directly related to a chapter, but like when you see people who are really doing well financially, right? Like when you're talking like top CEOs, and so nobody knows how their life is like, right? Like, and a lot of times, at least a lot of literature says that yes, they might not be that happy, uh, but who knows, right? Like at least I don't know. So I'm just curious that is there grace in their life? Is that just power of the willpower, which gets them there? Is that some good karma from previous lives? What is it? What is it? Or is it even like just not a true test of doing well in life, in like just just having abundance in terms of wealth? I'm talking right now, right? Like purely in terms of wealth, having abundance in this life. What is the significance of that? Like what does that represent, uh in terms of the language we are using right now? Like in terms of spiritual language, what does that represent in the spiritual world, you having a lot of abundance in wealth?
At first, to answer your question, I would say all of the above. Past karma, uh, yes, even the energy, the utter willpower, even sometimes driven by craving and aversion. Uh, that's why sometimes we see in movies like Star Wars, Darth Vader talking about, hey, you don't know the power of dark side. And dark side is also powerful. A lot of the structures and companies and technologies in the world are created from that energy also as well. So it won't be entirely true to say that all uh, the creation can only happen from the space of presence. A lot of destructive creation is happening, which is destroying humanity in so many different ways from this different space. So, yes, dark side, the power of craving and aversion can also create things at phenomenal level. Now, you talked about how do we know if they are happy or not. In fact, some people did not leave it to just intuition. They actually went out and interviewed. I know that one guy, his name Mihaly something, right, who wrote this famous book Flow. He interviewed a lot of successful people, uh, not just the business leaders, but sports leaders and celebrities and political leaders, people who had power and money. And he also states that he found only a small number who had both happiness and a sense of abundance. Let's also, for the sake of our viewers, clarify difference between rich and abundant. A lot of time, a person can be a billionaire, but he may not be donating anything, or he may have sense of scarcity. Even in our own country, in fact, the top billionaires who are on the list, unfortunately, right now, are donating much, much less. And some of the other billionaires like Tata's or Azim Premji, who are doing a lot of charity, are nowhere on those lists because they never allowed wealth to be accumulated at an individual level. They created charitable trusts and ways where, wealth is basically they can give back to the society. So, yes, not all anybody who is rich feels abundant, number one. Now, even if you feel abundant, that also is not sufficient. It may be necessary condition, but not sufficient to be feeling joyful and fulfilled at life. For that, you need another wisdom, which is what we have been talking, which is connecting to within, finding that the joy is within you and not outside you, uh, understanding relationships and valuing relationships. So, wisdom, if we can summarize it as certain level of wisdom, which creates this happiness. So, when Mihaly was interviewing, he found only a small portion of people who had done well in terms of money or power, uh, were also happy and fulfilled. And then he studied them. And so, if you look at his study, it's all about wisdom. And he's saying that you can be in the state of flow in which you can both be happy and be successful materially on this space. So the difference between dark side and the other side in for example, like always think of Star Wars, but or the light they are speaking is in case of dark side you may get power and money, but it almost always will not make you feel happy and joyful. In the other side, the growth may be slow and steady, but you're more joyful. And it seems to, in fact, in the long term, it seems to impact humanity and the planet in much more positive ways and for very long time. I might like to say that if you see history of some of the very powerful invaders who created a lot of violence and felt like they were so powerful and they could kill so many people and take over so much territory, they were gone pretty much after their death. People, in fact, have been always looking down upon them and cursing them, and their impact, if anything, is negative. While you see other beings like Buddha and Krishna and Jesus, they were nobodies. in their time, so to speak, or their impact was much less in a smaller communities. It just kept growing, growing, growing over every passing century.
It's a very interesting observation. Yeah, I never thought of it about that way. And I also realized as you're saying Star Wars, there's definitely, I think there's an inner wisdom in all of us which knows this. That's why, like, if you see Harry Potter, right? I was thinking, no, Harry Potter is such a big, like, I don't know, like that stories appeal to so many people, right? Like, so many people read that. I read that. I have
Yeah,
really read
I
it.
have read it twice, the whole series. So yes.
Yes, I have read it more than twice, and I rarely read books. And Star Wars was like a hit in its own time, and it's basically on the same theme, right? Like it's on the theme of darkness and lightness, love and friendship and power, right? So it just shows that these ideas have such a mass appeal that there has to be an inner wisdom somewhere which just knows
Of course.
the power of this fundamental thought.
Yes.
So so Kavit, this was really interesting. And any closing thoughts for you? Like, I know this was mostly me asking questions, but um anything you wanted to share in this chapter, or any closing thoughts?
I believe that Krishna's message in this chapter, the emphatic statement by the Supreme Consciousness that don't lose this perspective from our lives, that this is it. There is just Supreme Consciousness and nothing else is worth it. At this point, I guess in chapter 9, he feels that the viewers and the readers or the seekers should now be ready to hear this truth and prioritize their lives in a way that nothing else really matters. Just focus all your energies. And if you can hear this statement of Krishna in your heart, then you are ready for it. From in Hindi, they use the term tan man dhan, right? So in every way possible, from at the material level, at the psychological level, and from your heart, dwell and focus all your energies on this one single goal. That I'll not compromise this. I will not leave the hand of my father, or you may say mother, of the supreme consciousness while I am traversing in this world. I never forget this truth within me. I believe this is what we can take out of this as amazing, prayer, you may say, or inspiration.
Yeah.
It's a very inspiring chapter. That
This chapter is about surrender, I think.
yes,
Like it's about prayer. It's about, yeah. Thank you so much, Kabir, as always, for sharing your wisdom with us.
yes.
And for our viewers, as we complete our 9 chapters, we'd love to hear from you. Any feedback you have for us. If you even like this, please do share and comment, because it will mean a lot to us. We'll see you for the rest of the 9 chapters starting from next episode. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sushant.